Record. Okay. All right. Well, hi and welcome everyone. I'm so honored. First of all, to Sunlight Spirit Retreats for having me, and to all of you for showing up early on a Saturday morning. So yeah, I have to say that Sunlight Spirit Retreats is just a welcome, energetic hug, and they have such a lovely, supportive community. So you definitely, if this is your first time here, please check out their offerings. And like, I guess before I start the presentation, I think we're going to divide this time into a recorded presentation on the moon and astrology and working with the phases. And then the last half is going to be open to questions. And part of what we're really wanting to do today is to provide awareness and answer questions for an upcoming event that's going to be facilitated by myself and Emmett Sylvester, who is the most amazing Qigong instructor you'll ever find and master of his life. So we did this about a year ago where we got together in person and we did the full moon ritual combined with Qigong exercises, and went outside around a bonfire and did a release of what wasn't serving us anymore. It was amazing. And so a year later, we're going to do one around the new moon, October 25th, which is really powerful, also a solar eclipse. So we'll talk in more detail, I think, at the end about what we're going to be doing there. So, so welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. So I'm just going to kind of begin with a little quote about, I call this slide presentation is part of a longer presentation. So I'm going to be going through it, a little bit faster, but we can always circle back for questions. But I love this quote about the moon. And so I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of read it. So just kind of as a little, set the stage for the presentation. So the moon is a loyal companion. It never leaves. It's always there, watching, steadfast, knowing us in our light and dark moments, changing forever just as we do. Every day is a different version of itself, sometimes weak and wane, sometimes strong and full of light. The moon understands what it means to be human, uncertain, alone, cratered by imperfections. Okay, so here's a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. And we're going to explore the moon through the lens of astrology. And there's so much that the moon represents in astrology. So we're just going to touch on that and the advantages of really purposefully and intentionally working with the monthly moon phases. There are intentional action steps that you can do for each of the moon phases. There are affirmations you can do. There's just a lot of things that you can intentionally do to work with the moon. And so we're just going to kind of talk about how to, start working with it a little bit more. And during the question and answer time, if there are things that, everybody intentionally does in their rituals, I would love to learn from each other in that. So, okay. So the moon and astrology. So probably most of you are aware that you would know your astrological sun sign, the kind of the core of who you are. The sun sign is a very kind of action oriented energy. And but you may or may not know that you also have a moon sign. And so if you were to read the characteristics of your sun sign, you might say, well, I don't necessarily relate with that. But if you have your astrological birth chart done and you find out the astrological sign that your moon was in at the time of your birth, you may resonate more with those characteristics. So each of the moon signs, they have certain characteristics to them. And so they complement the sun sign. It's kind of more the reflective part of your nature. There's a lot that the moon rules. And so I think the most important thing to understand is it's so important to take full advantage of working with the moon, because there's so many influences that planetary, or that it's not a planet, it's actually a luminary, but call it a planet for purposes of this talk. But there's so many influences that the moon has on us humans and on the earth. So it rules the tides of the moon. It's involved very much in planting and reaping. So the farmers use the moon cycles in the Farmer's Almanac. It's related to the reproductive cycle and the feminine energies. So there's just so much. And what I love about it is it's a planetary energy that we can actually see and connect with. And each month we can go outside, and hopefully if it's not too cloudy, we can actually see the monthly transformations and the way it looks a little different every night, and how sometimes it's the light that guides us home at the end of the day. So there's just so many influences that it has on us as humans. And so when I was learning astrology, one of the most important things that was told to me is that the energies are really not a one-way street. They're really meant to for us to interact and co-create with. And so it's you can just, I feel like if you work with the moon, you can just be more in the natural rhythms and flow of your life. So we could do a whole talk on the moon signs, but we can answer questions about that later if you have any. So you were also born under a moon phase. Each month, the moon goes through 8 distinct phases that we're going to talk a little bit about. So I've added, there's a website that I found where you can, if you don't know the moon phase you were born under, you can go and input your birth data, and it will tell you actually what moon phase you were born under. And it can just be another way, it's just another piece of data in understanding yourself. So it was really helpful when I learned mine. For example, I was born under a first quarter moon, which is where we take action. And I'm kind of one of those people that likes to be doing something all the time. So it was another way to just help to understand myself a little bit better. So you might find that really interesting if you go in and do that. Okay, so the moon in its cycle has essentially a 30-day, the lunation cycle is roughly 30 days, meaning that in that 30 days, it goes through all the constellations. So in your astrological birth chart, the moon would go and would hit every part of your chart within a 30-day cycle. So it moves quickly. It kind of triggers events, if you will. So, and I'm going to, later in the presentation, I'm going to give you a really good tool that you can use to track where the moon is going through each constellation at any given time, going backward and forward in time. And then in terms of, in astrology, each of the planet signs and houses all have different characteristics assigned to them. And there are rulerships, if you will, of different areas, because in your birth chart, everyone and everything is contained in the chart. So the moon is really important because it describes our, excuse me, our emotional nature. it rules so much, but the main thing that it teaches us is our instinctual, emotional nature and how we connect and relate to others. So it describes how we would tend to react or respond both within ourselves to something as well as to the relationships that we have in our lives. It rules our daily habits. It rules our, it describes, I guess, how we would tend to nurture and support ourselves, first of all, knowing about what our needs are, but then also how we would nurture and support anyone or anything in our life. So it rules also our perception of our nurturing parent, which is typically mom, and how we, our cohabitation style. So there's so many things that it rules. So it's really something to really dive into and learn about in your life and how that operates in your relationships. Okay. So I'm going to go to, like I said, each month there are 8 distinct phases of the moon. And I am going to use a metaphor in this part of the presentation. I'm going to kind of go through each of the 8 phases of the moon pretty quickly, and then we can circle back, like I said, if you have any questions. So when the new moon marks the time when the sun and the moon come together, and I'm going to use the metaphor of planting and I guess sowing and then reaping. So when the moon is in the new moon phase, it's a time when we're actually going to plant our seeds. And so, for example, for our event on October 25th, we're going to be doing it under the new moon. And part of it is going to be really intentionally thinking about during the coming month, which seeds or intentions are we wanting to plant that we're going to be able to kind of reap during that monthly cycle. So when you plant seeds, you want to think about it's a time of new beginnings. The sun and the moon are coming together, so it's a very powerful time. It's a time to bring these ideas into our consciousness and clarify our intentions and goals. It's not time to start them yet, but it's a time to start thinking about what we want to accomplish in the month. We could write it down, say it out loud to the universe. And what's lovely, I think, about working with the moon phases is it gives you like a short window of time to work with something, and then you get a time to either continue it or a time to start over with something else. So we won't be able to accomplish everything within the 30 days, but we can work on a portion of it, if you will. And so we might be continuing something that we had started in the past. So the affirmation during the new moon phase is I set my intention for the actions that I'm going to take shortly. So, and just to kind of circle back for everybody on this call, the new moon was actually last Sunday, September 25th, and we're about to step into the first quarter phase. So that's to just give you an idea of where we are at the moment. So the next phase is going to be the waxing crescent moon. And this is a time when we're really wanting to put more intention and energy into what we want to accomplish for the month. We want to lean into it, maybe add some action steps to your intention. And it's time to really step into the feeling of what you're wanting to, the intentions that you're wanting to co-create during the month. And then we get to the first quarter moon, where the seed that we planted at the new moon is starting to sprout. So this is your action energy. This is a time to really to go and to do and to set it into motion. So up to this time, we've made sure we're in alignment with the intention. Now it's time to take concrete action about that. step into our confidence and make strides towards our goals, we really want to really lean into it and take that action. And the first quarter moon is actually going to be this Sunday. If we're keeping track for this month. So then the next phase is actually the waxing gibbous moon. It's the bud phase. It's kind of 3 days before the moon becomes full. So I guess when we start the new moon, we're starting the waxing portion of the month. And the waxing gibbous moon is kind of the last push before we get to the full moon. So you're going to be adding to what you've started in the month. You want to really step into visualization and co-creation. So you might have a lot of energy. You might not sleep as well during this phase. If you're really, I find that people, especially if you have the moon in Cancer, you're really connected to the moon. And part of the affirmation is trusting that the universe is going to help you to focus your intention. So we're working with the energies and co-creating with them. And then we're going to get to the halfway point, the full moon, where the flower is going to emerge. And this is where we are it's oppositional energy. So we're kind of getting a reflection back on what we started during the month and where we're at with it. This is a time when the moon is closest to the earth. And it's a time to kind of celebrate what you've been able to create since the new moon started, and to things will kind of come to a little bit of a head. You want to kind of acknowledge what you have and what is working well that you're going to want to continue. But it can be a little bit of a testing phase where we need to release some of what is not working for us. So there is a lot, I think, of in the full moon is kind of sitting there knowing what do we want to continue and what do we need to release that no longer serves us. So there's so many things that we can do during the full moon. Meditating is fantastic because that allows us to be in the moment, understand what we're going to want to continue and what we're going to release. That doesn't serve us and prevents us from manifesting the intention going forward. So I think inaction is actually intentional as well. So it's a time to kind of sit and just realize, what we're going to need to release. And there's a lot that you can do under the full moon. A lot of times people will put crystals out to charge, and then sometimes they put water out that they want to drink for the rest of the month. They meditate, and it's just, there's a lot of action. As we know, during the full moon, things can get a little bit more active. The energies can get more active. So then from there, at the full moon, then we're going into the waning phase of the moon. So in the waning gibbous, it's the disseminating moon. It's a time where the energy is kind of decreasing, and it's a time where we really start to release and let go. Things that we want to continue, we might want to just either take some action in terms of correspondence with mailing packages, letters. We can reflect on maybe what is blocking us in terms of our fears, because the moon has a lot to do with our subconscious. And we start the process of trying to tie up the loose ends. We start kind of putting in our consciousness what we're going to need to do that. And then at the last quarter moon, it's a time to harvest really what wasn't picked at the full moon. So we completely tie up loose ends, support the final release of blocks and fears. And the affirmation is to receive the form of the intention the way it was truly intended in the perfect form. So we kind of learn what we have control over and what we don't during this phase. And then we're going to get to the waning crescent moon, where it's a time to really let go, and start the process of thinking about what we're going to be doing when the next new moon comes along, and what we're going to want to try to either continue or start anew. So it's a time to trust in the divine flow and timing, and to clear your head before the new cycle begins, and just to give thanks and gratitude for the universe for the guidance that it provided. So there are affirmations that you can say or put in your consciousness for each phase of the moon. And so at the new moon, we set our intentions, we feel our intentions. At the crescent moon, we take action during the first quarter. We trust in the universe and focusing the attention on the gibbous moon, and then release at the full moon. Try to see clearly what we need to continue forward on the disseminating moon. And just kind of understand that we're always in perfect flow. We're always in divine flow, even if we aren't in the exact flow of what we wanted at that moment. But we give gratitude to the universe, and we can always readjust and start again. Okay, so I wanted to go in a little bit more into some additional ways to work with the moon. There are crystals that are associated with the moon. The moonstone is the most obvious, but quartz, aquamarine, selenite. So wearing these crystals can kind of call in the energies of being in the flow of the moon. And there's also something called the moon diet, which is interesting. And I find in people's charts, if they have the moon really connected to their physical body or their health conditions, this can work really well. The thought is that when the moon is gaining in light, we want to, so I guess starting like at the new moon, when it's gaining in light, you kind of want to try to maintain your weight. And when the moon is waning in its cycle, if you can lose a pound or two, that's great, because that's a great time to try to release the weight and just try to maintain it. So it's kind of going with the being in tune with the light of the moon, and when it's waning and when it's waxing. So you can read more about that, but that's kind of an interesting phenomenon. And then there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of rituals, especially during the full moon, where we can put our crystals out and let the light of the moon charge them up, or recharge them. Sometimes people put a jar of water out there during the full moon to charge it during that night, and then the next morning they bring it in and they just sip on that water throughout the month. It's a great time to smudge, declutter, meditate, read tarot cards. And also, I highly recommend, I have a moon journal myself, so I highly recommend getting a journal that tracks your movements and intentions and actions that you take during the lunar cycles. It's a great place to have it all. It's a great method of keeping it all in one place. And so you can see, what you've done during the moon phases, what you want to continue. When you're meditating under a full moon, if you get an aha moment, write it in your journal. So I think moon journals are fantastic. And then there's a resource down here at the bottom. So, the moon is, the moon calendar is a way that you can track on each date, going backward in time or forward in time, where the moon was at in terms of which astrological constellation was it going through, and which lunar phase is it in at the moment, and what are the dates for each of those phases. And one of the things that we're going to do in the workshop is I'm going to help people I always say, take the collective energies and plug them directly into your chart so that you can understand where the new moon is falling in your personal astrological chart, your unique chart, because it's going to be different for everybody. And then you can concentrate your energies more in that area of your life. So one of the things we're going to do is I'm going to help you figure out how do I do that each month, so I know really how to be in flow with what the moon is offering me. Okay. And finally, it's my contact information, and I can go ahead and send everybody a copy of the slideshow presentation if they would like. So I see people, I see individuals, I work with families, I do a lot with helping. I'm a parent of 2 adult children, so I did a lot of training and like using the birth chart to help understand yourself and your family members better. And recently I've in ongoing training and working with like generational patterns and how to make positive shifts in those. So, all right, let me go ahead and stop the share at the moment.